Hello, this is the Provoked Prawn, and this is the Lian Li Lancool 217, which is available in both white and black, and I've built in both variations of it so that I can show you the differences between them and also talk to you about how the build process was, what it was like to craft in, the things you need to know, and obviously I'm also going to be doing some thermal testing, performance testing, and talking about other things later in the video. It's worth noting the specs of both these builds are slightly different. As you can see, the black case has a vertical GPU in it, and the white one doesn't, for example. I'll leave all the full specs in the description down below so you can see what they are, and we'll get to the testing later on, but I'm also going to leave timestamps so you can jump to the relevant points in the video. But I will report that my initial impressions of the case are that it is very nice. It runs quietly and efficiently and has a number of really nice features to it that I want to break down for you so we can go into all the different things of interest here and how it's another great case from Lian Li that's worth considering. As you'll see, it's got a fairly toolless design, so it comes apart really easily. The panels just tug off quite easily, all of them in every direction, and there is a thumb screw on the bottom airflow panel here, but otherwise it's pretty easy to take apart. There's a small dust filter for the power supply unit at the bottom of the case, which is going to be difficult to access because it's at the rear, which might be an issue that's worth bearing in mind. But when you strip it down, you'll see obviously nice cable management channels. A lot of cables are already set up and wired and tidied for you. And obviously a number of other highlights, 2 large fans on the front, 2 intake fans on the bottom, 1 rear exhaust fan. Lots of good stuff going on there. There were some odd things though. I found when I took the front panel off the black one, for example, there was this little bit of plastic that was loose in the case. Probably came loose in transit. Turns out that this is actually a blanking plate that goes between the 2 fans on the front here. So these are obviously 2 very large fans to give you good airflow and good cooling and to run quietly because of the sheer size of them. There's more to it than that though, because these fans can actually be repositioned in the case and really easily, as I'll show you in a second, which is another highlight, and that's why we have those blanking plates. So that makes it interesting in other ways. You'll see the white variant here and what they look like when they start spinning as well. And from the inside, you'll see they're interesting because they have little notches along the front and they're actually secured in place with rubber anti-vibration mountings there as well. So if you pop the blanking plates out of the way, you can actually lift the fan up and then pull it forward towards you away from the case and it will just come out. So it's not actually screwed into the case, it's secured in these brackets instead. Put it at the top, put it back in, you can move this bottom fan up as well. So you can put both the fans at the top of the case rather than above and below at the bottom and top, and then have the blanking plates in the middle. This allows you to shift the position of the fans and adjust the airflow. Now it's said that in the standard position, it's like for the GPU airflow, if you put them both at the top, it's more to focus on the CPU. I've not tested the difference between them in terms of how much difference this makes to the temperature, but it is really easy to do. So if you do want to be able to do it and test it yourself, it's very straightforward because as you can see, you don't even need to unscrew the fans. So there's no screwdriver involved there at all. You just maneuver them around and then put the blanking plates down at the bottom to fill in the gap here. So this is a nice design, a fairly unusual one, and yet it doesn't result in any fan noise that I've noticed because of it. So just because they're not fully secured with screws to the case doesn't seem to make a difference. Because of the design of the rubber things that mount into the case, it stops that. Accessories included in the box include these brackets, which mean you can actually swap out those fans if you want to for smaller versions, although I'm sticking with the standard fans for this. Now, you'll notice that also in accessories box is an additional dust filter with obviously a fine mesh on it. The standard mesh on the front is pretty good anyway, but you can also pop this additional dust mesh into it to really help eliminate the problems with dust in the future. I ran it like this in my testing as well, so in the thermal performance testing at the end of the video, bear in mind the dust filters there, so that might make a difference. Now we have 2 reverse blade intake fans on the bottom of the case, which you can see here, which have a different design to the way the fan blades look, and you'll notice there's a gap behind them, but we also have another fan at the back, which is obviously set up as an exhaust fan. Now this is really nice because you've got loads of fans already set up for you and they're already wired in as well, so they're also wired into it. You'll see there's a lot of cables running around in these cases when you get it out of the box, and you'll notice that they're plugged in already for you at the top here to a fan repeater. Now this is an interesting setup because it has both fan power and RGB connections on it, so 5-volt RGB connectors on it. the fans are not RGB fans, and yet you have ports for 5V RGB connections on there. So if you swap out for generic universal 5V RGB fans, you could connect them up to this. It then needs to be connected to the motherboard. So we have 3 connections here: 5V RGB, fan power, and SATA power connections. So I have to connect to the power supply unit as well to power these. But all the fans that are pre-installed in the case are already connected to this. So you then have to deal with these 3 connectors. And if you're not using the RGB, then you obviously don't need to bother with that one. You just need the system power and SATA power connectors. And then you've got all the fans powered. So the setup is very straightforward. I've got a full build guide that I'll link to in the description that I've done on the black variation of this case to talk you through all these steps if you need to know it. But bear in mind, it's very easy to do and makes life really straightforward, as long as you remember to plug in the power connector, for example, because obviously all of those fans are going to need to be powered, and then you can control the fan speed from your motherboard BIOS. Now, at the rear of the case, you'll notice something interesting. There's a blanking plate back there as well, and an extension lead for the power supply unit socket, because you can see there's a socket here at the rear of the case where you can plug in your wall mains power lead. Now, for the mounting of the power supply unit, normally you'd put the fan face down to pull air in from below, and you can do that in this case. But I'm using an RM shift power supply unit from Corsair in this build, and if you try to do that, the cables then end up pressed up against the back of the case, so it's not actually possible to do this. Now, you can flip it over instead and have the fan facing upwards, but then that's illogical because it'll be pulling air from above, so I'm not sure that makes sense to do. But if you want to make advantage of this extension lead setup and use that, then you have to do it like this if you're using the shift anyway, and then run a cable to it. So if you're using the Lian Li Edge power supply, it might be a little bit more logical because obviously the cabling on this is facing this way instead. So if you pop it in like that, you can put it in so the fan's facing upwards. Again, I don't really think that's logical to do that, but you can do it if you want to, or you can flip it the other way around. Now, I've not tested how much difference temperature makes in either of these positions. It's not something I've looked into, but you can see that you can have the choice to do this. So whichever way you want to mount it, you can do that. And then it's just securing with 4 screws there. And then you use the extension lead that's on the case to plug into the power supply unit, so that you can then do that and then plug your mains power supply into the port at the back of the case. You can do it either way around, as you can see. If you've done like I have with the edge upside down, then the power cable is also upside down, but that's not an issue. It doesn't become a problem, but you do need to make sure the power switch is on. More on that in a little while. Now, just above the power supply unit is a little tray which is secured to the case with 2 screws. Now, this can be removed and pulled out, and then it is used for mounting an SSD. So if you want to put a 2.5-inch SSD into the case in a position where it's visible, you can do this. It's relatively easy. Obviously, you've got a few different things. We've got some rubber mounts and some screws that need to be sorted out, and then you can basically pop it back into the case. Don't make the same mistake that I did. Go about screwing it in and then plugging the cables in, because you'll find it's difficult to do. First of all, plug those cables in. If you're going to do this, data and power cables need to be plugged in here, and then secure it down, because it's a little bit fiddly to do otherwise. But as you can see, you have the option to do this. This won't be for everybody, obviously, but I wanted to show that it was possible. There are other places you can mount your SSDs, which I'll show you in a minute. But what you'll see here is when it is set up, you can mostly tuck the cables away so they're out of sight. In the accessories box, you also have 2 cages which allow you to install extra drives. So there's a little tray that pops out of those, and you can put SSDs or hard disk drives in there. You can also put 2 drives in each of these, and you have the option of what you're installing, and I'll show you that in a second. But at the back of the case, you also have these plates mounted to the back of the motherboard tray, which also allow you to put SSDs on. So you can have 2 SSDs back here, and this might be the more logical and easy option to do. They're installed with thumb screws at the rear, so you just need to unscrew those and then pop them out. And then what you're doing is mounting a 2.5-inch SSD to this. Now, this is fairly straightforward as well, because you basically just need 4 of the motherboard screws for the same screws as that. Make sure you've got it the right way around so the connectors face towards the bottom of the case so you can easily access those. Screw these in, and then you've got extra SSDs. So as you're seeing already, you have loads of different positions for SSDs and some for hard drives as well. So if you want loads of storage in the case, it's perfectly plausible, and it doesn't have to be on display at the front of the case if you don't want to. So these trays just go back in to the back of the case and then obviously secured with those thumb screws there. And as you'll see, they don't seem to get in the way. Not during my build anyway. It's not a problem there to plug the cables into it. And you can easily run the power cables and data cables to the rear and mostly tidy things up neatly too. With a hard disk drive, you can take out the tray from the cage and this pops into there with a little bit of fiddling because there's some brackets along the side with pins which basically notch into the hard disk drive to secure it in place there. And then you have additional screws which you use to then secure the hard drive to the tray fully and then slot it back into the cage. Now the cage itself can then be notched into the bottom of the case, and there's two positions for doing this, one towards the front, one towards the back, so you can actually use both cages, and depending on your power supply unit it'll be easy to do. With the edge and the shift it would be, so that's worth bearing in mind. Now, like other Lian Li cases, this case has an accessories box where you can sort the screws out into various different points in here, so you can organize things nice and neatly. Really nice feature there that I like. The white version of the case comes with silver screws, the black one comes with black ones. I prefer the silver ones, I wish it was with both, but that's a personal preference. The other thing that's awesome about this case is it supports both standard motherboards, as you can see with this black one, and rear connect motherboards. So these are both ATX motherboards for reference, and they just both slot in easily with the standoffs that are already installed in there. But we've got cutouts for rear connect motherboards, so Project Zero, BTF, and Stealth motherboards, all those ones that have the connectors at the rear you can use in this case, and then you can hide the cables away, keep everything nice and neat at the front, and end up with a really tidy build. I really like these motherboards, and the case is perfect for that. If you've got the white one especially, because you can obviously see your peripherals inside nice and easily. With the rear connect motherboard, it makes life easy plugging things in as well, because obviously you just need to remove the cables from the various bits of Velcro that are already sort of tidied up for you, and then just slot them into place into the relevant ports. Now, it is a bit more fiddly because it's a limited amount of space at the back, so you do need to bear that in mind. With this one, I was fine. The 24-pin power cable on the Lian Li power supply unit, for example, is quite thin, but with some other power supplies, the cable can be quite thick, which could cause issues. On the right-hand side, you see you've got these little plastic clips which you can run cables in quite easily and nestle those away. So I've got the two EPS power cables in here, for example. And then you can get the door back on fairly easily, even if you've not got great cable management. So there was no plastic cable ties involved there, and it was pretty easy to do. With a standard motherboard, you can run the cables through the rubber areas at the front of the case, and there's also plenty of space to do this and make it neat. So you can see that on the right-hand side, we've got a few of those areas to run cables through and keep things nice and tidy there. Now I'm using a 360mm all-in-one cooler at the top here, which is easy enough to install. You will see you do have to negotiate your way around that rear fan. Now the top will come off, so you can unscrew the top if you want to and take it off, install your radiator to it, and then install it back into the case. I found it easy enough to do it this way. You'll notice also that you can run the cables through a hole at the top really easily as well, so they can all be hidden from view, but still get access to the top of the motherboard to plug in relevant cables. Now, I was using Corsair's IQ Link setup in the black variant of this case for the fans on the radiator. So we've got extra cables to deal with at the back. Not a problem. Plenty of space back there still for those as well. Those can be tidied up and tied down with the Velcro ties pretty easily. And so it's neat in both setups. So as you'll see, we've got the builds basically complete here. I went for the non-RGB fans on the radiator to match the rest of the case, and so try and make it look nice and neat. Now, if we take a look at this, there are some other things of interest, some small details that I've still not yet covered, but we'll get to those in a second. First of all, I want to talk about the installation of the GPU and what that leads to. So I'm using a 5070 in the white version of this case. Again, specs in the description down below, but bear that in mind for the testing. As you'll see, it's not huge, but it does fit nicely into the case. There's still plenty of space on the right-hand side, so if you had a larger 5090, for example, I don't think you'd have a problem there. The power cable also can be easily run from behind the fans and then tidied up, so it's possible to get this in there nice and neat, as you can see, hidden down behind those fans through the gap down the bottom there. One small point is you do need to make sure you've turned on the power supply unit if you're mounting it like this, because if that button's there, you have to take this panel off to be able to turn it off manually at the power supply. You have to make use of the power buttons on the case otherwise. Small thing. The other small thing is that there is a anti-sag bracket on the right hand side here. It's small and it's adjustable. You can adjust the height of it, and you can also move it over a bit if you need to. There's a little screw at the rear to loosen it. Then you just lift it up, pushes up against the bottom of the GPU, and then can be tightened up so it secures the graphics card and prevents it sagging over time. Nice little addition to the case. A lot of nice little features in this case. Now, in the black version of this case, I got Lian Li's vertical GPU mount, which is a separate purchase, and installed that in the case. I've got a separate guide on how to install this if you'd like to, that I'll link to in the description, because it is a little bit more fiddly, and obviously it's an extra purchase, but it is possible to install your GPU vertically in here relatively easily. This is a 4070 Ti, which mounts in there pretty easily and still has plenty of a gap between it and the glass, and obviously is sitting right above those intake fans as well, and in front of the ones at the front. Now, I also found that I can run the power cable behind it easily enough as well, so no problems there, no worries about the power cabling of it. And then with this, you can then adjust the position of the GPU and how it sits, because it tilts forwards, backwards, and stays central, and you can adjust it up and down as well, so it's a very good vertical mount. Now let's get on to the testing and the performance of these. So a number of different games, I'll talk about my experience with them. These are all played at 4K with maximum graphics on, so trying to push them to the limits. You'll see a variety of results here. But the experience with the black version of this case was that I found, as you can see from the temperature readouts on the top left of the screen, I was getting somewhere around 60 degrees C on the CPU and 60 degrees C on the GPU. So as a reminder, this is a 4070 Ti and a Core Ultra 7 265K, so some reasonable specs in here, and yeah, getting really good performance on it. The important thing is it also runs really quietly, so that was the nice thing from this, is just how quietly it runs. So not only are the fans already set up on wide for you, but they're pretty straightforward in terms of just getting down to business. So I didn't mess with the settings. Although it's plugged in and set up with the BIOS, on this case, in the black version, I didn't play around with the settings at all, so as default it was just running like that and cooling really well. And when I'm playing with speakers or with headphones, I tried both, I didn't find that I was hearing a lot of fan noise from the case, which is obviously a great benefit of this. Considering pushing 4K under pretty heavy load here with maximum graphics across a variety of games, are still getting pretty similar experience, as you can see from the temperature readouts in here. Basically 60 degrees on both CPU and GPU on most of these games, and yet the fans aren't really loud the whole time. So I think that's a really good performance metric for this. It's just done really well in this, really good experience all round from that. So it's nice, not only is it easy to set up because it's already basically wired up for you, just a couple of cables to connect up, not as many as you would if you had to deal with all those fans individually, but also it just runs out of the box in a really straightforward way as well, and it's nice and quiet because of it, so that's also a double benefit. People have asked about how the temperatures are with the vertical mount, and obviously I can't compare between the standard mount because I'm using different GPUs in this, but this is what you're getting from the vertical mounting, so I think that's a really good indicator of how well that Lian Li vertical mount gets on, and we'll get to the standard mounting of the newer card in a second. I also tested the CPU under load as well, so Cinebench 2024, for example, ran a benchmark test here to see how we got on. Got a really good score out of the Core Ultra 7 265K, and as you can see, average temperatures decent, max temperatures didn't show anything alarming either, so it's all good under 75 degrees there, for example, and that's excellent. Now, both cases, obviously, you can see slight differences there. With the white version, the wood paneling, for example, is a lighter colour. I can't say I like that as much. I prefer the dark on there, but that's a personal choice on that. Now with the 5070, I did find, as you'll see from these, that we're getting actually about 10 degrees hotter, so it's actually a little toastier, unfortunately, with the GPU at least. Now note a few things here. Obviously this is a 5070, so it is a newer card, more powerful. And also the front fans are in a different position to what they were on the black case, because I changed the position, if you remember. So that could be having an impact on it. Unfortunately, I've not tested this GPU in other cases to say whether this is a normal temperature for this just yet. It's my first time using it, so I can't say. But it does seem a little bit hot. It's weird that it's hotter. But as you see, the CPU is running nicely. This is an AMD CPU in the white build, so 9800X3D, and yeah, obviously we're still getting really good performance out of it, so you can see the FPS as well and the temperatures on it, and it's under 50 degrees, which I think is very impressive for this when running 4K, so it's done really well in this case, and the specs of this build have also worked pretty well, but it's just the temperatures of the GPU just a little bit hotter, for it was worth noting. So all told, this is a really good case, I think. It was really easy to build in, both with the standard motherboard and the rear connect motherboard. Really easy to wire up and set up. It looks really nice. I'm not too sure about the wood paneling personally. I don't know whether I like that, but if you do, then that obviously is up to you. I do think that the black case had nicer looking wood paneling, but I prefer the white case for the overall aesthetic of it, and you can see your components inside more easily. So stick around now, because I'm going to leave a couple of clips of sound tests of the black case so you can hear the audio of that while gaming without me talking, get an idea of what the sound levels are like, and hopefully you found this useful. If you did, subscribe to see more. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Thanks for watching. You've made it right to the end of the video, you brilliant legend you. If you've enjoyed it, click that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and drop me a comment down below if you've got any questions. If you really enjoyed it, consider joining the channel and see the benefits of doing so. Check out these other videos, you might well find them interesting or useful, and most importantly, have a great life.